The marble gates of the Davenport mansion loomed like a fortress, its polished steel catching the glare of the July sun. From the cracked sidewalk across the street, Jordan Hayes, a 12-year-old boy in a faded shirt 2 sizes too small, wiped the sweat from his brow and clutched his stomach. Hunger gnawed at him like a constant enemy. For 3 days, he had watched the servants wheel out trays of untouched food steaks, roasts, pastries dumped straight into the trash, while he and his grandmother shared stale bread for supper. Today he decided he couldn't watch anymore. He crossed the road, his small figure dwarfed by the towering gates, and slipped quietly toward the service entrance. His heart pounded, but his eyes burned with a courage far older than his years. When the door swung open, revealing the grandeur of the marble hall, Jordan froze, not from awe, but from determination. Seated in the center of the hall was Helena Davenport, her wheelchair angled toward the afternoon light, streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Her steel-gray eyes narrowed as she spotted him. And what she asked, her voice cold as crystal as a slum child doing in my house. Jordan swallowed hard but did not look away. "I came to make you an offer, ma'am. You throw away enough food to feed a family. If you give me your leftovers, I'll heal you." For a heartbeat, silence hung heavy. Then Helena let out a sharp laugh that echoed against the marble walls, brittle and cruel. "You heal me." She leaned forward slightly, her voice dripping with mockery. "Do you have any idea how ridiculous that sounds? I've spent millions on the best doctors in this country, 8 years of specialists, clinics, machines. And you, a ragged little boy, think you can do what no one else could." Jordan's jaw tightened. "Yes." The single word landed like a stone in the still air. Helena's laughter faded, her smile thin and venomous. "Tell me then, child. Why should I believe you? Because you've read about miracles in some fairy tale." Jordan's eyes flicked briefly to the clock on the wall. "Because every afternoon at exactly 2, you take 3 white pills and 1 blue one. You complain that your legs feel cold even in summer heat. And at night, when you think no one is watching, your feet twitch when you shout at the staff." Helena's expression faltered. For the first time in years, her mask of arrogance cracked. "How? How do you know?" That Jordan stood his ground, his small shoulders squared. "Because I've been watching. Not to mock you, not to steal, but because I recognize the signs. My grandmother taught me. You're not paralyzed the way they think you are." Her fingers gripped the arms of her wheelchair, knuckles white. For 8 years, no doctor, no nurse, no assistant had dared to say those words. Yet here was a boy in torn sneakers speaking them with calm certainty. "You insolent child," Helena hissed, though her voice trembled ever so slightly. "Do you think your street games can undo what science has failed to cure?" Jordan's gaze softened, though his tone remained steady. "Sometimes healing doesn't come from where you expect it. Sometimes it comes from those you least value." The silence that followed was suffocating. Helena's laugh tried to rise again, but it caught in her throat. For a split second, her eyes betrayed something far more dangerous than contempt, fear. Jordan saw it, and he knew. As he turned and walked out into the blinding sun, his stomach still empty, but his resolve unshaken, Helena Davenport had already made her first mistake. She had dismissed him, and that dismissal would be the beginning of her downfall. What neither of them knew was that this boy carried not only hunger in his belly, but 4 generations of knowledge in his blood. And soon, Helena's cruel laughter would turn into the bitterest regret of her life. The Hayes family had always lived in the shadow of wealth. From their apartment window in Riverside Gardens, Jordan could see the towers of the Davenport estate, glinting like a monument to a world that never wanted him. Yet, in that cramped two-room flat, with peeling wallpaper and a single flickering bulb, he had something the marble palace never did: wisdom passed down through generations. Martha Lewis Jordan's grandmother was 75, her back bent, but her spirit unbroken. She had once worked as a nurse's aide in a public hospital, cleaning floors and changing sheets, while doctors barely acknowledged her presence. But while they ignored her, Martha watched. She listened. And she remembered the knowledge whispered by her own grandmother, who had been a midwife in Mississippi, when healing meant more than prescriptions. Her kitchen cupboard was filled not with pills, but with jars of dried roots, bundles of herbs, and notebooks scrawled with remedies that modern science dismissed. Doctors treat symptoms, boy. She often told Jordan, her voice steady as she prepared their evening tea. But a healer looks deeper, always deeper. Jordan had learned early that survival required observation. At 5 years old, he noticed how Martha's hands trembled before her insulin shots. At 8, he memorized the sound of her heartbeat when she struggled to breathe. By 10, he was the one adjusting her diet, brewing teas, and measuring doses with the care of someone far older than his years. Doctors had once told Martha she wouldn't live past 70. She was now 75, alive, because of her grandson's diligence and the ancestral wisdom she had poured into him. Across the street, Helena Davenport lived a life of decadence. Once a socialite draped in diamonds, she had spent the last 8 years in a wheelchair, the tragic widow of Charles Davenport, whose sudden death left her a fortune. The newspapers wrote of her strength, her bravery, in the face of paralysis. But those who worked inside her mansion knew the truth. Helena's strength was cruelty. She barked orders, humiliated staff, and demanded loyalty bought with money. Dinner parties continued, guests tiptoeing around the elegant woman in the chair, while rumors swirled about how her husband had really died. Jordan had watched her world from the other side of the street, not with envy, but with the sharp eyes of someone trained to see what others ignored. When she yelled at her servants, her legs trembled ever so slightly. When she slammed her hand on the table, her feet curled beneath her gown. No doctor noticed, but Jordan did. "Grandma," he whispered one evening, sitting on the porch as the cicadas screamed in the summer heat. "What if someone looks paralyzed, but their body still reacts?" Martha leaned back, her gaze distant. "That's called pseudo-paralysis. It isn't the body that's broken. It's the mind. Trauma can lock a person tighter than chains, and no medicine in the world can set them free unless they're ready to face the truth." Jordan thought about Helena and the way she sneered at the poor, the way she clung to her chair like a throne. He realized she wasn't only trapped in her wheelchair. She was trapped in herself. Still approaching her had been dangerous. Martha warned him, prideful people hate nothing more than to be seen by those they look down on. "If you show her the truth, boy, she'll fight you with everything she has." But Jordan had grown up with hunger gnawing at his bones and wisdom whispering in his ears. He wasn't afraid of Helena's money or her cruelty. He had seen enough to know that even the most gilded walls couldn't protect someone from their own sickness. So when he stood in that marble hall and offered her a bargain, "Feed me your leftovers and I'll heal you," he wasn't just asking for scraps. He was throwing down a challenge. Because behind Helena Davenport's cold eyes, he had seen something that no doctor's chart could record: fear. Fear that her billions couldn't save her. Fear that a boy from Riverside Gardens had seen straight through her. And that fear was the first crack in her empire of lies. 3 days had passed since Jordan Hayes stood in Helena Davenport's marble hall and dared to speak the truth no doctor had. To her staff, Helena laughed it off, mocking the audacity of a slum boy who thought he could heal her. But behind closed doors, she couldn't sleep. Every time she swallowed her pills at precisely 2 o'clock, she heard his voice, 3 white, 1 blue. Every night when her legs twitched in her sleep, she woke drenched in sweat, convinced someone was watching. Helena Davenport, the woman who had humiliated senators and CEOs from her wheelchair throne, was rattled by a child, and she hated herself for it. On the other side of the street, Jordan sat with his grandmother Martha, helping her measure herbs for the evening tea. But even in that simple ritual, his mind replayed Helena's eyes when he spoke. Fear. That flicker of fear meant he had seen correctly. "She'll fight back," Martha warned, her weathered hands steady as she tied a bundle of dried leaves. Prideful people always do. When the rich are afraid of the poor, they use their money to destroy. True to her words, Helena's retaliation began quietly, like poison slipped into water. The next morning, Jordan was summoned to the principal's office at his scholarship school. The stern man adjusted his glasses, tapping a letter with the Davenport Foundation seal. "Jordan, we've received troubling reports," he said gravely. "Trespassing, harassment. A benefactor has expressed concern about your behavior." Jordan's stomach twisted. Helena. Of course it was her. "If there's another complaint," the principal continued, "your scholarship will be revoked." "Do you understand?" Jordan nodded silently. His education, his only path out of Riverside Gardens, was now hanging by a thread dangled cruelly by the woman who laughed at him. That night, the harassment followed them home. The building superintendent knocked on their door, waving a notice. "Complaints of noise," he barked. "Reports of trash left in the hall. I'll be inspecting regularly." Martha's eyes narrowed. "We've done nothing wrong." "Tell that to your neighbors," he sneered. "Rules are rules." When the door shut, Jordan clenched his fists. "She's trying to push us out, Grandma. She won't stop until we disappear." Martha touched his shoulder gently. "She wants you scared, boy. Don't give her that satisfaction." Meanwhile, inside her mansion, Helena met with Dr. Pierce, her longtime physician. "Run another set of tests," she demanded. "Full workup. Find something, anything to prove that boy is wrong." Dr. Pierce shifted uneasily. "Helena, the scans already show inconsistencies. Neural activity in regions that shouldn't be active." If enough, Helena's voice cracked like a whip. "I don't pay you to parrot science. I pay you to confirm what I tell you. Do your job." But even as she ordered him, she gripped the arms of her chair tighter because she had seen it too. Her toes curling, her muscles twitching when anger flared. Signs no amount of money could erase. For Jordan, the pressure mounted. He returned from school one afternoon to find their mailbox stuffed with eviction threats. His classmates whispered, repeating rumors planted by Helena's network. "Hey, Hayes," one boy jeered, "he'll my dog for leftovers too." Laughter followed him down the hallway. At home, Jordan dropped his backpack, frustration boiling over. "She's winning, Grandma. She has everything, money, power, the whole town listening to her. And all I've got is nothing." Martha looked at him, her eyes sharp despite her age. "You've got the truth, and the truth, boy, is heavier than gold. But it's useless if you bury it in fear." Her words settled in his chest like an ember. He remembered watching Helena's face when he named her pills. He remembered the tremor in her legs, and he knew she was terrified not of him, but of what he represented, proof that her empire of lies could collapse with a whisper. That night, Jordan opened his grandmother's worn leather notebook. Generations of scribbled observations filled the pages, cases of patients whose minds had locked their bodies, illnesses doctors dismissed, until healers saw what was really broken. He traced the words Martha had written years ago. Paralysis of the body begins in the paralysis of truth. Jordan closed the book, resolve hardening. She wants me afraid, he murmured. But I'm going to make her face herself. From the mansion window, Helena Davenport watched the flickering light of their small apartment across the street. Her jaw clenched her pride, screaming against the unease that crept deeper each day. And in that uneasy silence between their two worlds, the battle lines were drawn: wealth and cruelty on one side, truth and hunger on the other. The war had only just begun. The July heat pressed heavy over Riverside Gardens, the kind of air that clung to skin and slowed every step. Yet Jordan Hayes moved with purpose, his notebook tucked under one arm. For days he had stayed quiet, enduring Helena Davenport's attacks on his school record and his home. But silence, he knew, was a weapon too. And tonight, it was his turn to strike. He had been watching again. From the cracked window of their apartment, he recorded moments when Helena thought no one was looking. The twitch of her toes as she berated a maid. The tightening of her calves when she leaned forward in fury. Once in the early dawn, he caught her standing, yes standing, stretching her arms toward a high shelf before dropping back into her chair the moment footsteps echoed down the hall. He showed the footage to his grandmother, Martha Lewis, who studied the shaky video with eyes sharpened by decades of nursing. "She's not paralyzed," Martha whispered. "Her body works fine. What you're looking at is fear guilt. Trauma made flesh." Jordan frowned. "Then why keep pretending?" "Because the chair is her shield," Martha replied. "As long as she stays in it, people pity her. No one questions her power. And if she admits the truth, her empire collapses." That very afternoon, Helena received Dr. Pierce in her grand sitting room. The man adjusted his glasses nervously as she shoved the latest scans into his hands. "Tell me," she demanded. "Do they show anything?" "Any proof I'm paralyzed?" Dr. Pierce hesitated. "There is neural activity in your legs, Helena. Too much for someone truly immobile. I've ignored it before, but..." Her glare silenced him. "You'll ignore it again. Or would you rather explain to the medical board why you've been taking my payments for 8 years? He shifted uncomfortably, the weight of her words pressing down. "Very well. I'll write the report." Helena leaned back, her lips curling in bitter satisfaction. Yet as she signed the doctor's check, her fingers trembled. Because deep down, she knew the boy had seen what Pierce refused to say aloud. That night, Jordan sat with Martha on their porch, the cicadas buzzing in the thick summer air. "She's hiding behind that chair," he murmured. "But sooner or later she'll slip. I just need the right moment to show everyone." Martha handed him a steaming cup of herbal tea, her eyes reflecting the porch light. "Remember what I told you, boy. Healing isn't just about bodies. Sometimes it's about ripping away the lies people build around themselves." Jordan sipped the tea, determination hardening in his chest. "Then I'll heal her by showing the truth." The next morning, Helena found herself unsettled again. She wheeled into the dining room, expecting silence, only to hear muffled laughter outside. Pulling back the curtains, she froze. Across the street, pinned on the wall of the community bulletin board, was a series of photographs, grainy, distant, but unmistakable. They showed Helena in moments. No one was supposed to witness her foot flexing as she shouted, her legs tensing when startled. The final photo was the worst, her standing for a fleeting second caught by Jordan's quick lens. Her blood ran cold. She sent a maid tearing across the street, ripping the photos down while neighbors whispered and pointed. By nightfall, half the town had seen them. Helena stormed into Dr. Pierce's office that evening, slamming the photographs onto his desk. "Explain this," she snapped. The doctor paled. "Helena, these are consistent with what I've suspected. Psychosomatic paralysis. Your nervous system is intact. "It's your mind, stop," she shouted, her voice cracking. "Do not say another word. That boy is spreading lies, and if you value your career, you'll crush them." Dr. Pierce looked at her with something close to pity. Or maybe he's the only one brave enough to tell you the truth. Her hand lashed out, sending the photograph scattering across the floor. "Get out!" But when the office door closed, Helena slumped back in her chair, heart hammering. Because in the stillness, she remembered the flicker of movement in her legs. The boy's words echoed relentless. "You're not paralyzed the way they think you are." Across the street, Jordan watched the mansion's lights blaze long into the night. He flipped open his grandmother's notebook, tracing the words written decades ago. "A body in chains of the mind can only be freed when the truth is forced into the open." Martha's voice drifted from the kitchen. "You've shown her the crack, Jordan, but breaking the walls will take more than photographs." He closed the notebook, eyes narrowing. "Then I'll tear the whole house of lies down, brick by brick." And in that moment, the first twist of the story revealed itself. Not only that Helena Davenport wasn't crippled, but that her greatest wound wasn't in her body at all. It was in her soul. The town square buzzed with restless energy. It was Saturday morning, and word had spread fast. Helena Davenport, the widow in the wheelchair, was hosting a charity gala at her mansion. Her foundation had funded schools and hospitals, and she was determined to remind everyone of her generosity. But for Jordan Hayes, it was the perfect stage. From across the street, he watched carriages and sleek black sedans roll into the Davenport driveway. Men in suits, women in satin dresses, all filing into the marble hall that had once echoed with Helena's mocking laughter. Jordan's fists clenched around the folder in his hands. Inside were the photographs, the recordings, and his grandmother's notes. Martha had warned him, "You're walking into a lion's den, boy." But remember, truth doesn't whisper forever. It demands to be heard. The gala began with Helena herself at the center, seated regally in her chair. Diamonds glittered at her throat, her hair pinned into a crown of steel. Guests applauded politely as she lifted a champagne glass. Her smile practiced her voice steady. "Friends," she said, "tonight we gather to prove that compassion still exists. Though I have endured 8 long years in this chair, I have never let it stop me from serving this community." The crowd clapped, some moved, some skeptical. Helena's eyes swept over the room, and then froze. Jordan stood in the doorway, small and defiant, with Martha at his side. A ripple of whispers spread. "Isn't that the boy? The one from the photographs?" Helena's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. "Ah, the young man who enjoys telling stories. What brings you here, child? Have you come to beg again?" Jordan stepped forward, his voice clear despite the tremor in his hands. "No. I've come to tell the truth." Gasps echoed. All eyes turned toward him. He placed the folder on the long banquet table, spilling its contents. Photographs slid across the polished wood, grainy shots of Helena's twitching legs, her standing in the early morning light. Murmurs rose like a wave. "These," Jordan said, "are proof. Proof that Mrs. Davenport can walk. Proof that she's lied to all of you for 8 years. Helena's face went white, then flushed crimson. "Ridiculous," she snapped. "Do you think anyone will believe a child over my doctors?" Over years of medical records, Jordan's voice didn't waver. "Then let's hear from your doctor himself." All heads turned as Dr. Pierce shuffled nervously into the room. Summoned by Martha, his conscience had finally outweighed his fear. He cleared his throat, clutching his notes. "These scans." His voice cracked. "They've always shown activity in Mrs. Davenport's legs. She was never truly paralyzed." The room exploded with noise. Guests shouted, some in disbelief, others in anger. Helena slammed her hand on the armrest of her chair, her body trembling with rage. "You traitor," she screamed at Pierce. "You'll regret this." But Jordan raised his voice above the chaos. "You can threaten him, you can mock me, but you can't hide anymore. I've seen it. Everyone here has. And if you won't admit the truth, then prove me wrong." He pointed at her, his small hand steady as a blade. "Stand up." The room fell silent. Even the chandeliers seemed to hum with anticipation. Helena's chest heaved. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then slowly she attempted her practiced performance, the frail victim too weak to rise. But her fury betrayed her. As her body shook her legs, tensed muscles tightening for all to see. "Look," someone shouted. She moved. Another voice rose. "She's been lying to us." The pressure broke her composure. Helena's foot shifted, the motion undeniable. Gasps turned into shouts, guests surging closer, cameras flashing. "No," she cried, her voice cracking. "You don't understand." But it was too late. The image of the tragic widow had shattered, replaced by the undeniable truth of her deception. Jordan's voice rang through the uproar. "You said I was nothing, just a boy begging for scraps. But I saw what your millions blinded you to. You're not a prisoner of this chair, Mrs. Davenport. You're a prisoner of your lies." Helena's scream echoed through the hall, raw and desperate. But no one pitied her anymore. The spell of her wealth and victimhood had broken, and the crowd turned not in sympathy, but in anger. Martha stepped forward, her voice steady, cutting through the chaos. "The truth has come out tonight, and truth once seen can never be hidden again." The guests began to leave. Their admiration for Helena turned to disgust. Reporters pushed forward, questions flying like arrows. Dr. Pierce slipped away, pale and shaken. And in the center of the grand hall, Helena Davenport sat trembling, her diamonds cold against her skin, her empire of pity collapsing around her. For Jordan Hayes, it was the climax of a battle he never asked for, but one he refused to lose. The boy had spoken. The world had seen. And the lies that shielded Helena Davenport were crumbling beyond repair. The uproar from the gala had barely died down when the whispers turned into shouts across the city. By Sunday afternoon, newspapers ran with headlines, "Millionaire widow Davenport exposed, faked paralysis for 8 years." But what the public didn't yet know was far darker, and Jordan Hayes was ready to reveal it. That evening, Jordan and Martha returned to the mansion not through the servants' door, but through the front with Reverend Lawson and Dr. Pierce at their side. Helena sat waiting in her chair, her face, pale eyes ringed with shadows. She had dismissed her staff, but not even silence could hide the storm building in her chest. "You've humiliated me enough," she hissed as they entered. "Do you want money? Is that what this is? Take it and leave me in peace." Martha's voice cut like steel. "This isn't about money, Helena. It's about truth." Jordan opened his folder again this time, revealing more than photographs. Bank records, medical files, and a letter from an anonymous whistleblower, Dr. Pierce himself, who had kept copies of everything Helena demanded he bury. 8 years ago, Jordan began, his voice firm. "Your husband, Charles Davenport, was preparing to divorce you. The prenup meant you'd lose everything. And then suddenly an accident left you paralyzed." Helena's lips tightened, but her silence was louder than words. "You paid Dr. Pierce to confirm the paralysis," Jordan continued. $5 million to declare you immobile. Except you weren't." Reverend Lawson held up one of the documents. Her scans always showed activity. Her body was never broken. Her soul was. Helena's hands trembled against the chair's arms. "You can't prove." "Yes, we can," Dr. Pierce interrupted, shame heavy in his voice. "I falsified reports, signed off on lies. Because you threatened to ruin me if I didn't. I should have come forward years ago. Martha stepped closer, her voice low and steady. And then, there's Charles. Helena's eyes flickered, panic flashing across her face. You thought no one would notice, Martha said. The sudden heart attack, the will rewritten a week before his death. But I worked in hospitals long enough to recognize the symptoms: digitalis poisoning. Slow, subtle, and nearly impossible to trace. Jordan placed another file on the table, Charles Davenport's medical records, side by side with Martha's handwritten notes. You killed him. To keep the fortune. To keep the mansion. To keep your power. Helena slammed her hands on the armrest, rising halfway before collapsing back, her mask crumbling. You don't understand, she cried, her voice raw. I gave him everything, my youth, my life. And he was going to throw me away for some younger woman. Do you think I would let him leave me with nothing? The room went silent. Her confession hung heavy, the last brick torn from her fortress of lies. Jordan stepped forward, his small figure trembling with both fear and certainty. You laughed at me, Mrs. Davenport. You told me I was nothing. But the truth doesn't care about money. It doesn't care about power. It only waits for the moment it can't be ignored anymore. Helena's eyes darted wildly between them. The boy, the grandmother, the doctor, the pastor. She was surrounded not by wealth or influence, but by something she could never buy: conscience. Outside, sirens wailed, growing louder with each passing second. Someone had already called the authorities. Martha placed a hand on Jordan's shoulder, her voice calm. The real paralysis was never in your legs, Helena. It was in your soul. You built your life on lies, and now those lies have chained you tighter than any sickness ever could. Helena sank back, her body trembling, her diamonds rattling softly against the wheelchair's arms. For the first time, she didn't look like a queen on a throne. She looked like what she truly was, a prisoner of her own choices. The heavy knock came at the door. Police, open up. Jordan turned to Helena, his voice quiet but unyielding. The truth has caught you, Mrs. Davenport, and there's no chair in the world you can hide in now. As the officers entered, Helena closed her eyes. For a fleeting second, she wasn't the proud widow or the cruel socialite. She was just a broken woman, realizing too late that the boy she mocked had become the one to strip away everything she thought untouchable. The empire of Helena Davenport had fallen not with a gunshot, not with a scandal hushed away, but with the courage of a hungry boy who refused to stay silent. The Davenport mansion no longer gleamed like a fortress of untouchable wealth. Its marble halls stood silent, stripped of servants' laughter and lies. Helena Davenport had been led away in handcuffs, her face pale under the flashes of cameras. For the first time in 8 years, her wheelchair was empty. Across the street in the cramped apartment of Riverside Gardens, a different light burned. Not the harsh glare of chandeliers, but the warm glow of a single candle flickering on the kitchen table. Jordan Hayes sat beside his grandmother, Martha Lewis, his hands wrapped around a mug of steaming tea. The boy who had once begged for scraps now sat at the center of something much greater respect. The news spread faster than wildfire. Boy exposes millionaire fraud. Widow faked paralysis, killed husband. Child hero brings justice to Riverside. Journalists crowded Riverside Gardens, desperate to meet the 12-year-old who had brought down a billionaire. But Jordan avoided the attention, staying close to Martha, who reminded him, glory fades, boy, but truth lasts. Instead of fame, Jordan wanted something else: books. Knowledge. He spent hours in the community library, where for the first time strangers nodded at him, not with pity, but with pride. One afternoon, a letter arrived. The envelope bore the seal of a prestigious academy. A full scholarship. A future once unthinkable was now within reach. Jordan held the letter with trembling hands. "Grandma, we did it." Martha's eyes shone with tears. "No, child. You did it. You took the wisdom of those before you and carried it further than any of us dreamed." Meanwhile, the Davenport fortune was seized, the mansion sold. But it didn't vanish into another greedy pocket. By order of the court, and with Reverend Lawson's insistence, it was converted into a community center and clinic, a place where children from Riverside Gardens could study, and families could receive care without fear of money or status. The first day it opened, Jordan walked those marble halls again, not as an intruder, not as a beggar, but as a symbol. Where once Helena laughed at him, now portraits of scholars, doctors, and teachers decorated the walls, reminding every visitor that dignity belonged to all. On a quiet evening, Jordan and Martha stood outside the new center. The sun was setting, painting the sky with streaks of orange and violet. Children's laughter spilled from the open windows, mingling with the scent of fresh paint and new beginnings. Jordan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small candle, the same one that had burned on their kitchen table through every trial. He lit it carefully, shielding the flame from the wind, and placed it on the stone steps. "Why a candle, boy?" Martha asked softly, though she already knew. Jordan smiled faintly, because even a little light can expose the darkest lies, and once the truth is seen, it can never be unseen. Martha took his hand, her grip strong despite her age. "Remember that, Jordan. The world will try to sell you fear, wealth, power. But never forget, our worth isn't for sale." As night fell, the candle glowed steady on the steps of what was once Helena Davenport's palace of deceit. Now it stood as a beacon, a symbol of justice reclaimed by those once ignored. Children from Riverside Gardens pressed their faces to the glass, pointing at Jordan, whispering his name like a promise. He wasn't just the boy who asked for leftovers anymore. He was the boy who showed a town that truth, no matter how small, can topple empires. And in that flame flickering against the darkness, the story of Helena's downfall and Jordan's courage found its final chapter, one that would be retold long after the marble crumbled and the riches faded.